Hello, VidCon.
Are the mics on? Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Hello.
Just to kick things off, I'm going to have you guys start and go down the line. Introduce yourself, kind of what content you make.
Oh, hi. My name is Natalie Wynn. I am a YouTuber. I created a YouTube channel called ContraPoints that does video essays about LGBT issues and about emotions and whatever I feel like talking about. And yeah, that's my main thing. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Cristian Dennis. Pronouns are he, him. I am an entertainer. I like to dance, do makeup, hair, film music videos and stuff. And yeah, I just like to encourage everyone to just shine as bright as you can, have fun, dance, shake your ass, have a good time. And yeah, that's me.
My name is Griffin Maxwell Brooks. I go by they, them pronouns. I'm from New York. I'm a content creator. I do lots of things. I make fashion content. I make content in nightlife. I'm also a DJ. I make some like political content, comedic content, kind of a little bit of everywhere, but mostly I'm just being me. Yeah.
Hi, I'm MegaGoneFree. I go by they, she pronouns. I make a lot of music content. I'm a musician. I also make a lot of LGBT content, political content, and yeah.
My name is Mylin. I will be moderating this session. Also, as Christian mentioned, it's a performer. Both Christian and Mega are performing in one of our evening shows, so you guys should come see them do
Tap
their
in.
thing.
I'm tonight and then Mega's tomorrow, so yeah, it's gonna be a good time.
There's a reason to stay through the whole VidCon.
Yes, stick around.
If you can't tell, I work at VidCon. So, in your specific content niche, how do you guys, or where do you feel the state of queer representation is? How has it evolved over the past few years? Obviously, Natalie, you've been on YouTube for a while, but then TikTok kind of blew up, and I feel like now the queer world online has kind of like shifted and become more in the forefront.
Well, I feel like things have gotten better and worse in the last, 8 years. I think that there's so many more LGBT creators than there was when I started. There's so many more voices in the conversation. And in some ways, there's less opposition to it, but in some ways there's more. So I know this is probably a later question, but for me it's been kind of some things have gone better, some things have gone worse. I mostly do YouTube, I post on Instagram, so TikTok, we'll have to leave others to comment on TikTok because I'm, an aging elder, I guess, and I don't keep up with TikTok, but you guys will have to inform me.
I would say when I started doing social media, just in general, there weren't a lot of black, gay, feminine men that I saw kind of doing events like this. And so I remember just coming out to events and seeing the few, black kids and just people who just, you can always tell when people are kind of hiding a part of themselves. I just saw that they didn't see themselves on these stages, and I really wanted to try to do that. And just through TikTok was really how I started. I started just posting myself. People started questioning my pronouns, and I was like, guys, I feel like, why are we this concerned about it? Or I just didn't answer the question, just kept on doing my thing. And now it's we're just so visible. There's so many of us out there. There's a lot of black, gay, feminine men. A lot of just queer representation it's been a lot more than when I started, and like you said, I think it has gone. The more visible we are, the more people are to see us that don't like us. So it's that's also a downside, but I love that we're seen, we're here, and we're up on these stages. So.
I think obviously queer representation in media has expanded over time, I also think like the rise of like TikTok and like short form content becoming kind of like the main like consumed content, or not main, but like more consumed, certainly changed that. I think people also like, because of the pandemic, were like more ready and willing to like share parts of themselves that came out when you have nothing to do but sit and like think. But I also think representation has kind of like evolved in interesting ways where like as queer people become, you know, more prevalent and more popular, they become commodifiable. And I think where there used to be kind of a pretty like stark divide between like online queer communities and like online communities that were like general and not like inherently queer, we've seen those kind of like merge in a very interesting way. And I think there's like a lot, like the corporate side of things is like really a testament to that, because you just see the way that like that separation like goes away, and how sometimes like there are like intersections, and sometimes like corporations and brands like aren't ready and willing, you know, to like put queer people in the spotlight. So it's sort of a push and pull. I think it gets better with time as more people just become more visible, but you know, nuance.
I know for me personally, my niche is music. I make a lot of music centered around LGBT, the way that I choose to identify personally. I identify as non-binary. And I know the non-binary community is very, like, it's very low-key on the internet, but I've noticed with the more that I post about just myself and the way that I choose to present, it creates a lot of community, and it makes it easier for other queer identifying people online to connect and find each other. And that's what it's really all about, like community. That's why we're here.
So I feel like a lot of kind of slang that is used today kind of evolved from either Black Twitter, queer Twitter. I was wondering if you guys had any kind of interesting or memorable experiences of maybe people outside of the community using terms that they might not know. For example, one of my friends referred to Machine Gun Kelly and Travis Barker as twinks, and I had to tell her that's not what they are.
That's so cute. That is so cute. Well, okay, so it's funny. Recent example, literally yesterday, one of my friends was talking about like their experience figuring out what YT meant. And I thought it was funny because it's like, I feel like a lot of like Black Twitter just one day was like, this is what we're gonna say. And then it just became a thing. And it's like, it's just like, it's a funny thing. And just, honestly, it's just easier to just say that instead of typing it out. But she was like, what does that mean? And I was like, oh girl. And I explained it to her and she was like, but who did this and when? And I was like, I don't know, Black Twitter is just, it's a void, and just a lot, we don't know when it started or when anything starts, but just we as a collective just have things, and then it just becomes a trending thing, and all of a sudden it's everyone's using it. And now that TikTok's around, it's like so easy to circulate these terms, and it's also easy for people to use them without knowing really what it is. Like the YT one is like a pretty simple one, but there are other ones that it's like, girl, do you know what you just said? Like, do we maybe you need more gay friends, more
I think so often of the I finna be in the pit girl, you know? And like, you know,
it's
God
like,
bless
baby,
her.
that's not, are we sure about that?
It is, it's really interesting too to see like the terms become part of like the global zeitgeist, and then that like bite people in the butt on the way around. Like I watched like kind of recently like an interview at like Dion Lee's fashion show of like somebody asking like Alex Earle like who her fashion week trade is, and she's like, I don't know what that is. And I'm like, I don't expect you to know what that is.
It's so funny because it's like they're trying to get into it, and it's like, just a little bit of research, just a little bit.
I feel like we're a couple months away from a Republican congressperson referring to something as work and slay, and I think that was, you know, that's going to be a tough moment.
It's cute. I'm wondering if
you like it? It's cute.
Yeah, I feel like what are we gonna be doing when we're older, like in like 50 years or whatever, and we're like, what's the slang gonna be? And are we gonna be using it wrong? I don't know.
Yeah, I feel like AAVE in general is passed around a lot amongst the queer community, and it's not really acknowledged where it roots from. You know, it roots from Black women, Black trans women. You know, so
1000%, yeah.
Yeah, if you're going to use it, I think you should at least make an effort to understand where it comes from and like make sure that you're using it correctly, because I think otherwise I've seen a lot of cringe posting on Twitter from people who don't know quite what they almost have. I won't even say they have the spirit of it because they don't, but like It's a little awkward, yeah.
I feel like the safest one, period. Everyone knows that one. That's
Yeah.
like, y'all, you're safe. We should make like a list of like the easy safe words.
It was easy for people to
Easy,
catch
yeah,
on to
someone
what
should
it
do
meant.
that on Twitter and just be like, here for
Just
everybody.
a pocket guide
Just a
that you
pocket
keep in
guide,
your
yeah.
wallet.
Yeah, the ally starter kit. Yeah. All the words you're allowed to say.
For real.
And then kind of on that note, are there any pieces of media where you're watching and you're just kind of like, they had to fit this storyline in, but a queer person definitely did not write this?
Oh, yeah, I feel like there's definitely examples on like, I can't think of one specifically, but like, it's kind of like when producers are obviously trying to like reach out to the kid audience. Now there's so much like references to TikTok things that we talked about 2 years ago that are on in movies now and shows now, and we're like, girl, it's a little bit cringe.
Trying to catch up.
Yeah, yeah, but
Yeah, I mean, things don't hit the streaming services until like 2 years after they become popular. I also think, yeah, it's interesting. I think like, I oftentimes see this with like representation that feels very forced is like when it's like not properly integrated,
Yeah.
and like to witness it on social media or just in media in general is always very interesting because it like always comes across as very inauthentic.
Yeah, that's
It's very
kind of how I
obvious.
feel. Have you guys seen Love Victor on Hulu?
yeah, I've honestly watched a little bit. I haven't seen everything.
There
but-
is one scene where
Uh-huh.
like someone passes their midterms and then they just have someone go, yeah, slay.
yeah, like stuff like that. Stuff like
Just
that.
why
is
would
like,
you just do that?
Like you need like every production team needs someone that's actually like a part of it that knows that'll be like you cannot say that. Everyone's gonna literally be like that's so cringe.
Hire a gay writer. I
Right.
feel like a lot of these problems be
There's a
solved.
simple solution to
Yeah.
Yeah, gay flight attendant, you know, just like throwing a character.
The
in.
WGA reached a deal. Now is the time to hire. How do you guys feel about content like the Middle Ground series, and do you think it helps, hurts? Just because I know that like, I feel like in a contained piece of content, it's kind of hard to truly get both sides. I know that Jubilee has done kind of like a middle ground between more liberal and conservative queers, and I feel like it sometimes just kind of leaves the divide more open because you know they're trying to optimize this content for viewership, so a lot is being cut.
I feel like Griffin can say a lot because I did see the clips of you and you ate.
You had to call me out.
Because I was like, oh,
Yeah.
you better say something.
So I was on like a Vice panel about masculinity,
that was everywhere. It was everywhere.
and
Leave it out.
I can never escape those reaction memes. I can never escape the videos of me and like Christian Walker like awkwardly glancing at each other. It certainly is like a phenomenon. I mean, I walked into like the Vice offices, rest in peace, and I like saw him in the room, and I was like, I went to the bathroom and I was like, am I going to do this? Like, am I going to get into a camera and have this interaction? Because it certainly is. I think that I like to pick and choose my battles, and I think that sometimes there are people who, you know, are trying to just like get a rise out of each other and like are like just sort of like political like alarmists. Like there's not really like a statement being made. It's just like let me freak out as many people as possible. I think like those videos, like the Vice one, whether it's Jubilee or Middle Ground, like all of these just like forms of media where they're kind of like demonstrating like a range on the political spectrum, are often, I don't know, I feel like they're either often like sort of unsafe, like they think they kind of demonstrate like I don't know, I think like the queer conservative is like a minority that like isn't as like popular as people like to think. I think it's more like we're going to broadcast it because it's like ironic and crazy and like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I find that to be like an offensive juxtaposition on its own. It's sort of just like, I don't know, like fake representation.
It's not for the right reasons.
Right.
Yeah, at all.
I also think like queer palatability is like an interesting conversation, like an interesting topic. Like I think that trying to like rationalize like middle ground between like people whose like very existences are being contested is like a bit of an issue. I don't think that like, you know, we need to be putting like, you know, like trans people and queer people in a room with like homophobic people and like trying to
Like,
find a
let's
middle
see,
ground. And I'm like,
Yeah.
someone just doesn't agree with someone else's like personhood. That's not really productive.
Yeah, the truth between two disagreeing positions is not always an average of the two.
Yeah.
And that's especially true when one of them is like a bad faith position that's there to antagonize an entire group of people. Like the insistence on treating this as like, wow, this is just a fair debate between two people and we're gonna hear both sides and we're all gonna make up our mind. Like, I do feel that that's kind of a misuse of journalism and it's a misuse of these platforms when you're kind of, I don't know, as a journalist, as a moderator, as a person who decides what the debate is going to be, you kind of determine a lot of what people end up thinking based on just what you say the two sides are. Like,
Yeah, because with social media now, I feel like everyone just sees, I mean, I'm guilty, everyone's guilty. If you see a clip and you just are like, oh my God, you kind of, the first thing that jumps in your mind is like, you just kind of make a story and run with it. Not a lot of people take the time to really do as much like watching the whole video or like really seeing the points that are being brought up. And a lot of times there aren't really points being brought up. There's, like you said, someone antagonizing and just like,
People
so.
love catching a story.
Yeah, yeah.
Especially on TikTok. Like, them first 3 seconds, they be real important.
No, for real, for real.
So, how do you guys feel about always having to kind of be the educator? I feel like obviously this community, like people kind of take all of the community's issues to anyone in the community. And for example, there are celebrities that make these big grandstands, like Dak Shepard and Kristen Bell didn't get married until gay people had the right to vote. But then last week, Dak Shepard has Jonathan Van Ness on the show and starts kind of questioning him on the validity of trans women playing in women's sports. What do you think the best way is for people who claim to be allies to kind of approach these conversations, and what the cutoff point is, instead of just playing devil's advocate and trying to just like keep that conversation going?
well, definitely choose when to engage. Like, just, I don't know, there's people who are not worth engaging with. Like, in my opinion, we do not need to go debate Ben Shapiro about whether trans people should exist. Like, this is just not a helpful debate. But I do think that, you know, if you want to engage on a question like trans athletics, I think the way to do it is not necessarily to have this like fact-checking, debunking mindset, because I think that that's not really what ends up convincing people anyway. It's more like press them on like why they're asking these questions. Like, okay, how many trans women have won the Olympics, for example? I think the answer to that question is very close to zero, if it isn't zero. So it's like, well, okay, well, why are we bringing this up then? Are you bringing this topic up because there's this like epidemic of trans women dominating women's sports? Well, no. So why are you bringing it up? And, you know, then you can sort of shift the conversation back to that, and then they have to sit there explaining that they're just upset about a hypothetical they made up. And it's like, okay, well, why did you come up with this hypothetical? Whose interests is this hypothetical serving? Who is being targeted by being asked to imagine this situation, right? So I think that, you know, that's the way you have to engage if you're going to do it at all, is you have to be cautious about like what you're letting the way the person you're talking to, you don't want to let them set terms of a conversation that are just going to inherently disadvantage the people you're trying to speak for.
I can speak to like specifically the issue of like trans eligibility in sports. So for context, I dove at Princeton University up until I graduated in May, and while I was diving at Princeton, Leah Thomas was swimming for the University of Pennsylvania, so I was very close to that issue, and I kind of like witnessed firsthand like the discourse over like trans eligibility in sports like unfold and then become like this like nationwide political debate. And I can attest to what like Natalie said is like coming up front with like the debunking, because at the end of the day like it isn't effective because a lot of these people just have it set in stone like it's unfair. And like I could go on and on for like an hour about like the reasons why like trans people should be like eligible in sports and why like biological essentialism will be the death of us all if we think too hard about it. But at the end of the day, like, I mean, that like issue specifically was like the framework for like an onslaught of like anti-trans legislation. Like that was the first thing that like this like new wave of like modern anti-trans legislation like started with, and like there are like legislators who have admitted that. And I think that was like kind of a wake-up call for me, like in terms of like political engagement and like choosing your battles, because I chose that battle for a long time and I eventually just had to walk away from it because it was like very personal to me. But you witness firsthand the way that people are like unable to like converse and like rationalize if they have like an idea of what they think is right or wrong, and specifically if they feel like it affects them personally. And like, I don't know, I like in the podcast you were talking about, from like what I like listened to of it, it's sort of just like, oh, but it's unfair. Like you see how it's unfair. And Jonathan Van Ness is coming at them with like a bulleted list of like why like that is like an overarching argument which like misses so many points. But like the people who think that it's just unfair are not like educated on like the like, you know, like like sex diversity and like what that means in like sports. Like they're looking to get like an aha gotcha moment. So it certainly is like you have to choose your battles.
Yeah, and they have to be willing to want to understand.
Right.
Where it kind of seemed like he was kind of being like, okay, but what if? So for creators who are queer, do you think that they're held to a different standard than other creators? Do you think if a creator is queer, their audiences expect them to make that a part of their content?
I think so. I think that a lot of people, I've known people who are queer, but they are not public about it. And one of the anxieties about coming out to the audience is this anxiety that people are just going to want me to be their queer representative instead of them just being taken for, you know, whatever else they were bringing to the table. So I do think that's an issue, and I understand it, but I also think that it's something that every individual creator has to decide for themselves, like how much you want to balance out, like the good it will do to have you be, you know, in the spotlight as a queer person in the way that that matters to a lot of people. But you also, you know, I get people wanting to manage their brand in a way where it's like, well, you're afraid that if you come out as gay or whatever, like you're going to be classed as like a gay musician, and like that, you know, comes with a certain set of expectations that you may not want, and like, so I don't know, it's complicated.
Yeah, I think it's complicated. I think it just really depends. Like, it's really situational because there are some people who, like with social media, it's so easy and so random how people blow up. And any, I guess, any group or any, it just depends on what happens with them. And whenever people get certain opportunities, that's kind of when it's like somehow they become the face of this group and the face of that. And then it's like the pressure kind of gets to them. And I'm sure that like, it's not like that for everyone. It depends on, I feel like all of us kind of, the way that we represent ourselves is very personal to us. You show your queerness through your music. Like we all have different ways of representing, of showing ourselves. So it depends on how you choose to share your art or whatever you're doing on social media, how much of yourself you choose to share. But I don't think it's a pressure that a lot of people, I don't think well, I'm like, it's so complicated. I'm trying to like figure it out. But Mega, I feel like you want to help me out. Yeah.
I think definitely.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I get like, cause I make a lot of different types. Like I make, obviously, music is my main thing, but I make a bunch of different types of content, including LGBT content, and like I notice like across all of my videos, I'll get comments. How do I come out? How do I do this? Like, and I understand where it's coming from because, like, as we're talking about, people are looking for advocates.
Yeah.
People are looking for a guide, especially like young viewers online. I completely understand that. But I think it can get to be overwhelming to a certain point. But it's all about how you choose to consume it and how you choose to take it. Like you said, we all blow up in completely different ways, and yeah, that's what I have to add.
Speaking of being the face of, do you guys feel like once your audience does know that there is kind of more pressure to kind of weave in queerness into your content? Or, I mean, Christian, you're very publicly like in a relationship for a long time on the internet. Do you feel like couples are just like, well, we don't see that many queer couples in media, so now we're going to be the ones?
Yeah, I think it depends on, for my community, it was very far and few to see that, and so there was a little bit of there was excitement to be like, oh my goodness, this is so cool, and now we can see this, and this is what it looks like, and stuff like that. But then the pressure does come on when life happens, and then it's like you have to choose. You have to go with how life goes, and I mean, the reality is things happen, and with whatever group that is online, or gays, blacks, LGBT, our whole community is very far, and I think that you just have to choose
how much of yourself you're trying to
that's what I was trying to say. Choose how much you want to share of your journey, and it's up to you. Like, you can let the pressure get to you, or you can just choose to continue on and just enjoy yourself. And that's also representation as well, because everyone goes through things, and you can choose to be like, yeah, things happen, I'm happy, and our group is going to continue to thrive. As a black queer, I'm going to continue to do everything that, I can and be happy and stuff like that. So, yeah.
I feel like I feel less pressure from like, sorry, something very exciting is happening over there.
They are living.
Somebody's booth appearance is popping off.
I think I feel less pressure from like my audience and like the consumers of what I put out to be like representation, and more pressure from like brands. Like, I can speak to it from like a fashion perspective, where like Fashion Week comes around, and a lot of like I like attend a lot of these shows, and they like put me in the back, and then Pride comes around, and they're like, we want you running red carpet, we want you in every picture, and I'm like, I do think that like I love being queer representation, like I love being like a gay icon, sure, but I also think like if you're going to have like proper representation from like a brand perspective, you need to be incorporating queer people in the same way that you incorporate just like the general audience. Not to say that you shouldn't like ignore their queerness in like as like a factor in like who you choose to like be represented, but if you're like pigeonholing queer people into only running like queer production and like the Pride gig, it kind of like defeats the purpose of like representation entirely.
Sorry, I'm just grabbing a fan. I'm hot, girl. Thank you.
Speaking of Pride, you guys do not need to name names, but what are kind of some things that you would like to see brands do, and are there any brands that you think kind of are great advocates and allies for us during the other 11 months of the year? They're thinking about keeping queer people in their campaigns throughout other times of the year, and making sure that like we are just a part of their brand.
I was gonna say, I saw you post something, Griffin, about how like Pride was so dry this year. I felt like Pride was kind of dry. Like, well, at least
Soho was not like the rainbow paradise. I was like, listen,
no, I mean,
as much as I criticize like corporate Pride, it was nice to see all the rainbow logos. Don't take them away.
I feel like it was kind of dry. I feel like it was very obvious, kind of like. I feel like are we gonna go there? I feel like after everything with Black Lives Matter, it was like the brands were like, oh, we got it. And this was the same thing with Pride. I think in 2022, it was like, oh, we got it. And then it was like, we got it now, we good. Like, thanks for all that help.
After that, Megan Salter video came out where she was just like, hey, gay,
coming down to Cecily's Butter Shop. Yeah, I would love to see brands like stand by the representation they choose to onboard.
Yes. One thing I mean, here's an example of what not to do. Like this spring, Bud Light. I think we all know what I'm talking about. But like, they decided to have a trans woman named Dylan Mulvaney be a brand ambassador on Instagram, meaning that Dylan basically like took a picture with a Bud Light. And then the backlash to this was so extreme. Like we had like Kid Rock like firing semi-automatic rifles into cases of Bud Light,
Very random.
and we had like, I mean, I've never seen people get this angry about basically just the fact that a brand worked with a trans woman. Like there wasn't even a political like pretense to what they were mad about. It's like, no, you had a trans woman drink the beer and we will not. Like it was a really strong backlash, and I feel like a lot of corporations honestly have kind of backed away out of fear of that, which kind of shows that like there's sometimes kind of a frailty to that level of like corporate allegiance, right? I think Bud Light handled it in the worst possible way, which is they issued this apology, which was like, it was never our intention to be divisive and something about America.
Family
right?
values,
Yeah,
America.
yeah.
America.
Which, I don't know. I mean, at the very least, if you're going to have a queer person represent your brand, you should at least stand by them when there's a massive homophobic backlash.
Right.
Yeah, because also it didn't end well for them. Like
No.
you did this, and then sure you got a lot of backlash, but when you turn around and then like take back the representation which you formerly stood by, you've now outlawed every audience, which is just bad marketing. But
Everyone hates you.
yeah, exactly.
That's what I meant earlier when I was saying like things happen, you become the face of, and there's all these expectations set on you from all around the table, and it's like, I just took a picture with a Bud Light. Like, I don't know what's going on. Yeah.
Also, since then, Kid Rock has been seen drinking Bud Light. So
Interesting.
what even was the point?
What was the point?
Right.
Just to be mad.
Yeah, I think it's also like it's a very alarming thing, I think, to see like representation go awry like that. Because it certainly was like it was not the first time that like a brand with like, you know, like a very general population had like onboarded like a queer person. I think it was just sort of like the perfect storm of like a political shift, like a person in the spotlight and like a brand deal that like pissed a bunch of beer drinkers off. And like, I don't know, I think that there was always conversation about like, is this good representation? Like, oh, you shouldn't have taken the brand deal in the first place because now like, look, you've created all this like disarray. But I think, I don't know, the way I see it is that this hate existed, and just because like it took like a Bud Light campaign to bring it out of people doesn't mean that we need to like turn around and like criticize people. Like, I don't know, Dylan Mulvaney is not the villain for taking like a Bud Light sponsorship. You can say what you want about like corporate
Yeah,
pride.
she was getting her back.
There's a
Right.
yeah, well,
Right.
you know, to whatever extent, I think it demonstrates like the issue at hand, like the way that like, you know, these like issues and these like thoughts like exist, and maybe it took, you know, this weird like reaction to a sponsorship to bring it out of people, but it certainly is like indicative of a larger problem. And to see a brand especially like repeal its thoughts, I think also like created a shift in like the brand deals. I mean, like I had a brand that I was like a large brand that I was going to work with for Pride that like got like a little bit of backlash and just canceled the whole campaign. And I was just like, okay,
Like null and void.
yeah, signed contracts. I still got paid. But like, you know, like these things happen, and like it's not like it's never like a good like marketing tactic for them to like repeal. But for the most part, like if you're gonna like, you know, like put your foot down, like sink it into the ground and keep
Yeah,
it there.
literally. Stand by.
Yeah, I do think that if you're gonna have a queer person and you're gonna use them to kind of elevate your brand to a new audience, you should at least be willing to like withstand some tiny percentage of the backlash that queer people have to face every day
all the
just for
time.
existing.
Yeah.
Like, and if you can't handle 5 seconds of that, then like don't try to market yourself as being LGBT positive.
Unrealistic expectations.
Also, at the end of the day, like what you said, Kid Rock is still drinking Bud Light. like
Right, the world
these
is
things
still
come
turning.
around, you know. Like at the end of the day, like the general audience of these people, like they see this, they get mad about it, and they forget and they move on.
Something else happens.
But like all you've done on the internet is like show your butt if you're just gonna get out there, pretend to do representation, and then take it back when you get a little bit of backlash, or even a lot of backlash.
And they also tend to overestimate, I think, the size of the backlash. Like, oh, I think there's a tendency on the brand side to sort of freak out when, like, it's like, oh, there's a homophobe wandering around Target, like, knocking over pride displays. But it's like, that doesn't really represent the core of your audience, does it? Or the core of your consumer base.
Right.
So I hope that people take into account that, like, this is like a small group of people who's have so little going on in their life that like the Target pride stand is like this is the hill they will die on,
That will
right?
go.
Yeah.
Oh, what are you gonna do if you can't get a cheaply made rainbow romper situation?
Like, oh my gosh, what am I gonna do? We'll live.
I love having 2 square feet in a store in June. On brands, do you guys feel that there's something more that platforms can be doing to protect not only queer creators, but kind of creators of any marginalized group? And are there any platforms or a feature of a platform you think is really helpful for those marginalized creators?
I think so. I think that there are a lot. I know for me personally, I was in, they had the Black Creators Program. They also had the LGBT Creators Program. They had one for Latinx community. That was very helpful, especially for me in growing my relationships with brands. I think that's one thing that every one of the platforms can do. I think that was a very smart thing that TikTok did, was creating these programs for creators to join. And it's not just for like big creators, it's for smaller creators as well, to try to help them to grow on each platform.
I was gonna say when I was part of like the first round of that happening on TikTok, kind of when everything was going on, right at the very beginning of Black Lives Matter, of everything, I remember there was just so much of an uproar. It's like the first time we noticed as a social media community that like we make enough noise, they're gonna at least start to listen. And there was the Black Creator Summit, or I forget the exact title of it, but I was on that, and we did a lot. We worked a lot. I remember the first meeting, I think a lot of people were kind of scared to bring up things, and I was like, girl, no. We're tired of all these Black creators are making all these dances, all these people are doing all this stuff, and we only see the same people at the top of the For You page or whatever it is. Let's change up the algorithm. Let's see other people. Everyone knows who makes these dances. Everyone knows who does this, that, and the other. We all know where a lot of things originate from. A lot of people, TikTok knows people. We all know. So it's like, you know how like someone will do something, it's like, oh, like I saw this on so-and-so's page, or so-and-so started this trend. Like, it was really helpful once we had those groups and those, like the Latinx creator program and all those programs. It was really cool. And I remember when we started doing ours, it was so that people could grow. It was like to help people. It was like these communities are not able to grow because the same group is at the forefront, and like, can we get a little bit more representation? Can you guys do something about this? And it helped a lot. And I think that, at least for me, lately I've been like, this is what my friend said, I've been creating more than I've been consuming. And so I'm very much like in and out of the app and stuff. So I know that I'm sure that there's a lot more that can be done. It's not something that you just make happen one time when there's a bunch of noise, and then you're like, all right, and you let it die 2 years after. Like, if you're gonna create it, like let's make a plan for this to be long term. And, you know, people graduate out of the program, and let's bring in new people, and like, you know, let's have these summits and do all this stuff. Let's not just like wait until, being proactive. Let's not just wait until everyone makes noise. Let's not wait until the non-binary community makes an uproar, and then we have something. Like, let's have some proactive stuff that happens so that, you know, we can kind of solve or get things going before issues come up.
Yeah, I think it's true. I think platforms, it often feels like they're doing their best. It's helpful to remind myself that when like content platforms do like queer outreach or just like outreach to like different communities, it's often motivated by like what's getting views, because what's making them money. I think a great model not to follow is like the artist formerly known as Twitter. Because they just do whatever they want. But it's interesting. I think it's always like, it's encouraging when platforms do like, you know, like, for example, like the queer community like outreach on like TikTok, like the growth programs, I think was like, it's really great to like feel that, but it also kind of feels like the bare minimum, you know? Right.
Yeah, right.
I also think like, just in general, like most social media platforms can do better with like content moderation. Like, I think oftentimes things that get flagged for the wrong reason. And I think that things that don't get flagged like should be flagged all the time. And I kind of think like they know what they're doing with that. Like, you know, AI like runs the world. Like, we're not stupid. Like, I think you can stop like viral media from existing in like an echo chamber of hate pretty easily. Just as easily as you can stop like shadow banning or like silencing content from like queer creators and like creators of color, etc.
To go back to what you said about the flagging, I recently came out with a song, LGBT song, about being a lesbian. And I posted a lot of content about it on Instagram, and so much of my content got flagged. So many things, it got flagged for sexual activity, but things got flagged like the cover art for my, for the song, or like things, I feel like sometimes on social media, sexuality can be sexualized.
Absolutely.
And no, like I'm just trying to be me. I'm just trying to share about who I love. So,
I mean,
Yeah, that's a huge problem on YouTube too, where like stuff will get flagged as adult content or like not 18 up because you use like the word lesbian in the title, and lesbian is considered like adult because a lot of times these restrictions on sexual content disproportionately target LGBT people because LGBT people being LGBT is considered like sexual in and of itself in a way that kind of is going to overwhelmingly affect any kind of content that we make.
Yeah.
Which is like, this is not Florida. Like, we can say gay, just like being, the state of being queer is not like an inherently sexual thing. And like, you know, putting that forward and like hammering that point in is doing nothing but harming people.
Yes.
Just because it was brought up a couple times, with that I feel like there are a lot of like, you can say gay, and now Pride is like more open to using the word queer. But since Mega and Natalie brought it up, do you think that lesbians will ever be able to reclaim that term, just because that,
so heavily sexualized.
I think it's very hard for some lesbians to use that word. They stick to gay, they stick to queer, just because for a long time that word specifically has been over-sexualized, and it feels almost dangerous to use it.
Well, I think that it is really frustrating, for example, when you have, you know, like, and I'm not talking about Reddit, but on Reddit, like, r/lesbians, that is a pornography forum, right? And so you have to go to an alternate one called like actual lesbians or whatever to actually get content that's for lesbians, because the main one is pornography. And I think that in general the problem is like there's probably more men who fetishize lesbians than there are lesbians, right? So it's yeah, I mean, I don't know. On the one hand, it's like it's frustrating to say like, oh, we're just gonna have to abandon this entire word for his sexuality because of straight people. But on the other hand, I mean, there's like, you know, sometimes you just have to make practical choices, and that means that saying gay women, saying queer women, saying sapphics or whatever, you know, like it ends up just being more practical to do that. So I don't know.
Yeah, the topic of like content moderation, sorry, not to like backtrack, is interesting to me just because, I mean, it's something that I've struggled with. It's something that like so many of my creators' friends have struggled with. Like just like being queer online gets you flagged, and that's on every social media. I think I've like there are no platforms that I like don't really experience that with. And I think like I don't know, in conversation with like anyone who works at one of these and like works like within like the algorithm of, like content moderation will always tell you like, oh, like it's not like a selective thing. Like we do it based on like mass reports and like based on, and I'm like, well, if you're funneling content like via an algorithm to like people who are gonna report it, like maybe there's a problem with the algorithm, and like I don't know. It seems like this, like there is a solution for this, which people are glossing over in like in hopes of just like letting it kind of slip under the rug. But like if you know this is disproportionately affecting like queer people, then like you know where there are like plenty of cishet people making like sexual music videos like all the time on every social media that doesn't have to do with anything, but like just because it gets stuck in like an alt-right echo chamber, gets a bunch of reports, doesn't mean that they should just like take it down without reviewing it.
Then that affects the rest of your content.
Yeah.
Right, and also like 100 times out of 100 you like do like you appeal it and then it goes right back up because they send it to like an actual person who's like, oh, this is fine.
Yeah.
Or you know, sometimes if they like me on that day. But but then like if it's that simple to like, you know, kind of like appeal like content violations that come from like just like anti-queer people like mass reporting content, like it seems like there's a way around that.
Yeah. It's really obvious. I feel like all of us like it's like a thing, like we all know how the algorithm works without really knowing how it works. It's so obvious because of how we get treated. So it's like, if y'all are doing this and it's that easy for you to fix it, so how about we just don't make it happen in the first place? But I don't know, they always say that, oh, it's not, and we're just, and it's like, I'm like, okay,
You're so quick to say.
I'm like, all right.
Well, I'm going to try to use our last few minutes on something fun. Where do you guys see kind of media evolving, featuring queer people in the next 5 years? I mean, obviously, this year, Beyonce introduced a lot of people to like the ballroom genre.
Well, I was just gonna say, I feel like, so I was like, maybe I'm being extra by saying Beyonce, but no, I feel like literally this tour this summer has done a lot by just doing so little. I feel like it's such a, like, everyone getting ready to go to a concert, everyone getting all dressed up. I feel like a lot of people, like just the representation that was out there of all different types of people just having fun, bonding over this type of music. I feel like it's gonna have an aftershock of a lot in fashion, a lot in music, a lot in representation, a lot in entertainment. I feel like it's gonna be, I feel like we're gonna be everywhere. Like we kind of already are, but it's gonna be like, do you see how powerful we are? Like where could you find silver? After Beyonce we're wearing silver, where was silver? Naomi Campbell said you cannot find silver nowhere in LA. Like it's just like, it was a movement, and I feel like the aftershock of that is just gonna be a lot of things influenced because of how like widespread this movement was. Yeah. So I just feel like we're gonna be everywhere even more than we were right now.
Yeah, I think it's a good, also like, I don't know, Renaissance is like a really good framework to like kind of see how like we have progressed, because I think that they're like, I don't know. I was in New York when that album came out. It was like an earthquake every day. Like you go to every club and they were playing like front to back. But like it was, you know, I think it's indicative of like this growth and kind of like the queer community like proving to society that like we are present enough for like this to be like mainstream pop culture. Because I mean, it's Beyonce.
Yeah, it's Beyonce, girl.
Then let the namesake speak for itself. But like, yeah, it's it also is like I think the first time that like nightlife and like ballroom have taken like the main stage in like such a big way, in a way that also like kind of demonstrated like where like so much of like pop culture has originated, like the history of like electronic music, the history of like voguing and dancing and Vogue dancing and like ballroom and like the vernacular and the slang that comes from that. I think it is like but it's a good indicator for like where we see media going. I'm hopeful that it like continues in that direction. I think like, you know, my biggest thing too is like I want to see more and more in media like queer people like taking the main stage. Like I think that's always just like a helpful and like effective thing. Like movies and TV shows like written and produced and like starring queer people and like representation not needing to be like, you know, like a conscious thing as much as like we've created a narrative which like needs queer people because queer people are part of society. Society needs queer people.
But no, I do think that someone like Beyonce has kind of set a blueprint on how someone who might not be in the community can kind of really be an ally and kind of amplify that voice, because I don't know if you all have seen the Renaissance tour. I'm sure they're going to make a movie out of it. You should watch it. There's an entire portion where she's doing a costume change, and you are just watching different queer dancers get highlighted.
I was going to say a lot of the show, which is really exciting because later tonight I'm doing a little bit of a medley of the show. That's how much it's influenced me and my journey and stuff. But thank you. But like the show is really like, when you watch it, I think people who just listened to the album, heard the album, loved it, love Beyonce, but when you get there, you're like, oh my God, there's the visuals, there's storytelling, there's a lot of things that are so like really subtle, but so like powerful. And it's just really, really amazing to see, like you said, like ballroom and nightlife being at the forefront, because it is a lot of what drives like a lot of these trends and a lot of pop culture, a lot of people that are in those communities and already doing that, you know. Like it's something that I want to dive more into too. I'm like, I want to go to a ball. I want to like, I've never done that before. So it kind of, yeah, oh, let's go. See? Yeah, so.
Shout out to Andrew McConty. He's the creative director of Parkwood and a sickening techno DJ, the brain behind it all.
He's watching tonight. I'll send him a video, please.
As a last question, do you have any kind of words of advice to maybe some baby gays that are out there just trying to figure it out, whether it is about talking to their families or maybe not talking to their families. I feel like that is kind of a place that kind of gets looked over because it is all about like, how do I come out? And sometimes it's, if they're not accepting of you, you don't need them.
Well, I think safety first. If you need your family for financial support and that's the situation you're in, then, you know, that might be the first priority for you. If you're lucky and privileged to be able to have independence, well, then that kind of leaves you a little more space to say, like, mom, dad, whoever else. Like, I personally have found that even if the reaction is negative, it's a load off your shoulders to not be wearing a mask all the time around the people you're supposedly closest with. But, you know, the reaction can be negative, and I don't know, part of the concept of chosen family is that you want to surround yourself with people who accept you for who you are, and if that doesn't include your parents, then, you know, it's okay to see them less.
Yes.
Like, I know that's, I don't know if that's a popular thing to say, but like, that can bring peace too, so.
Chosen family is a big,
yeah.
That's a big point. I love my chosen family back in New York. Like, and just to know that you have communities, the LGBT community. You are not alone. It may feel like you're alone, but look at us. We're all sitting here together talking about this. Like, that's why we share about our sexuality online and the way that we choose to identify. Like, you always have. There will always be someone to listen. You may have to find them. It's not always easy to find sometimes, but we are here.
I think like safety first, but authenticity is freeing. And if you can
Yes.
put yourself in a situation where you feel comfortable like taking that leap, like it's one that's worth taking.
I agree. I was gonna say, I feel like that's kind of how I became comfortable and kind of just started being more of myself. It is safety first. You have to take it safety first, mental health second. I feel like, because like when you take care of your mental health, you really kind of learn more about yourself and really see how certain things affect you and stuff like that. It can help you kind of gauge where you feel most comfortable to be authentically yourself. And once you find those spaces, then things really come naturally. Like you become less afraid of the loss of people who don't support you and more excited about the support that you're gonna get when you get to be in those spaces.
Yes.
So it's like safety first, mental health second, and authenticity is gonna follow right after that. So yeah.
It's well said. Yeah.
Cool. Well, I feel like we all could kind of talk about being queer all day, but unfortunately we are at time, so I want to thank our panelists. Remember to come back tonight to see Christian and tomorrow to see Mega.
Yes.